Good morning, and welcome to the 2026 Shoukry Leadership Speaker Series, a spring signature UGA lecture. My name is Elizabeth Jones. I am a junior Leonard Leadership Scholar with the Institute of Leadership Advancement studying economics. This lecture series features well-known leaders who share their unique leadership styles and experiences to educate and inspire others. Today, it is my distinct honor to introduce Honorable Steve C. Jones, Senior United States District Judge for the Northern District for Georgia. Judge Jones was nominated by President Barack Obama in 2011 and has since presided over thousands of federal criminal and civil cases involving the United States Constitution, federal law, and matters of significant public importance. On January 1st, 2025, he assumed senior status, continuing to render substantial judicial services to the district court. Prior to his federal appointment, Judge Jones served for many years as Superior Court Judge in the Western Judicial Circuit, where he presided over civil and criminal matters and led the Felony Drug Court Program, an initiative integrating treatment and accountability to address substance abuse within the justice system. His earlier services include roles as Municipal Court Judge, Assistant District Attorney, and Director of the Athens Child Support Recovery Unit. Beyond the courtroom, Judge Jones has demonstrated extraordinary leadership and service. A proud graduate of the University of Georgia, where he earned both his BBA and JD, he has served his alma mater in numerous capacities, including as Foundation Emeritus Trustees Chair, past President of the Alumni Association, and member of the Athletic Association Board. His commitment to professionalism, equality, and community service is reflected in decades of involvement with state commissions, legal organizations, and charitable foundations. Judge Jones' distinguished career has been recognized with numerous honors, including the University of Georgia's President Medal in 2025, the Chief Justice Thomas Marshall Professionalism Award, and the Robert Benningham Award for Community Service, among many others. Judge Jones exemplifies leadership grounded in service, integrity, and dedication to both the law and community. We are grateful for his time and his perspective today. Our moderator today is Brennan Cox, president of Thoreau Capital. Brennan is a proud University of Georgia and ILA Leadership Fellow alumnus. He spent 7 years at the University of Georgia, earning both his undergraduate and law degrees with the highest honors. He is a former law clerk for the Honorable Steve C. Jones. They first met when they served on the UGA Athletic Board. Please join me in welcoming today's speaker.
Thanks. There you go. Well, thank you. I'm very excited about today. It's rare that I'm asking you the questions.
I know.
Typically, you would ask me the questions.
Yeah, change the roles.
But the three things I want to talk about is, one, your foundation, two, switching careers to become a judge, and then succeeding as a judge. So, you've built a house before.
Oh, yeah, won't do it again.
You're still married.
Yes.
And
if you want to find out how strong your marriage is, build a house together.
And you told me the foundation is important. What was your foundation growing up in Athens?
Well, growing up in Athens, one thing I was taught and stressed, there are certain things you don't compromise. The foundation had to include honesty, fairness, and respect for other people. And that's the whole thing I always try to do in any job, any position I've had, is make sure that I presented myself in a way and treated people the way I want to be treated. So therefore, like building a house, that foundation had to be in there. So growing up, it's always was, hey, look, am I being respectful to people? Did I do this the right way? Every day, when I finish the day, I go home, I evaluate and critique what I did that day. If I think I wasn't doing something right, I try to correct it.
If you did your best.
I did my best. That's that motto that my mom taught me. Always give your best. So those four things you don't change or compromise: honesty, fairness, respect for people, and giving your best, always.
There was two other things your mom told you about. What were those?
Always say thank you, and never take people for granted. And she stressed that because she said, look, people owe you an opportunity to be treated nice, and thank them. Let people know they appreciate what they do and how they do it, and don't take them for granted. I don't take for granted the things that I have an opportunity to be here today. There's a lot of people that deserve it more than I do. So when you get that opportunity, don't take it for granted, and that's where the doing your best comes in at. She indicated if you have an opportunity, don't take it for granted, give your best, and then let people know you appreciate it by saying thank you. And I found out that thank you does a lot in how people look at you and treat you.
Beyond your mom and, who in the local Athens community or the national, America at the time did you look up to as a hero?
Growing up, the African American church, it was starting off at a young age, it was the minister and the deacons, because they would be the ones standing up. They were like lighthouses in the community. They gave the guidance. And then as I got older and began to appreciate different things, there was the civil rights leaders, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Andrew Young, John Lewis, Thurgood Marshall, Constance Baker Motley. Now here's the reason why those people moved into that leadership influence. Each one of those individuals, I began to realize as I got older, could have gone out and made a lot of money doing something else. They could have had a very easy, comfortable lives. Leadership, as I learned from them there, is that you got to be willing to make the sacrifice sometimes. They made the sacrifice, even to the point of giving their lives. So they were influential. And as I moved into my profession, there was people like Chief Justice George Carlin, Chief Justice Robert Benham. When I became Superior Court Judge, Justice Benham called me up. And he says, Steve, I want to meet with you. Well, yes, sir, what did I be? So we get that. One thing he told me I never forgot. He says, as Superior Court Judge, you have a lot of authority, or you're going to have a lot of authority to do a lot of things. He said, but you're going to learn, or you should learn. Everything you have a right to do is not the right thing to do. And with Justice Carlin and Justice Benham, their philosophies were a little bit different, but there are things they believed in they would not compromise on. And they were good examples for me on open-mindedness, but as Justice Carlin would say, I will put my sword in the ground and right here and keep it. And then, of course, now I have chief judges and individuals that I greatly respect and watch.
What was an example of having to say no and stand up on your values, whether you were growing up in Athens, at Georgia?
Well, you have to be prepared to say no, again, in a lot of different ways, but you have to be prepared to say no and take the consequences that come with it.
The cost.
The cost. In other words, some people find it, I always found it that if I did something I didn't think was right, the cost to me on my conscience and my heart was harder than what I lost otherwise. So saying no always started with me was, can I live with this decision? And if the answer to that was no, we stopped it right there. But the second thing was, you have to be prepared as a leader in leadership position, or just in it, to pay the cost of saying no. It could be, it could be a loss of friends, loss of popularity. It could cost you prosperous, but that comes with it.
I think tell me about some of the judges that you looked up to who paid that price.
There's a book I recommend everybody read. Well, I can't do it. I can't encourage people to spend money as judge. I suggest you think about it. It's called The Unlikely Heroes by Jack Bass. In this book, in 1954, it was Brown versus Board of Education. There was 12 circuit court judges in the old Fifth Circuit. They included Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. And these judges were required to implement that Brown case. They had to desegregate schools, swimming pools, houses, jobs. And one of the judges was named John Minor Wisdom. And John Minor Wisdom, in 1962, authored an opinion that said that James Meredith could go to the University of Mississippi. First African American there. Now, he had been going to the same church with his family for years. You know how we all go to church, you sit on the same seat every Sunday, all right? He goes to the pew to sit down next to people he's known for years, grew up with. And they get up and they walk and go to another pew. Another judge gets up one morning, finds poison out in the yard for his dog. They were men at the time. These men gave up popularity. They gave up prosperity. Some of them were even on the track, I think, in my opinion, to become Supreme Court justice. They believed in the Constitution. And what it taught me, and this is why I really see these men as leaders and people I admire, they were committed to doing the right thing. And it taught me that sometimes you got to make unpopular decisions. Everybody's not love you about it. It's easy to make decisions where everybody loves is popular, but to make that decision that your next door neighbor don't like, the person you grew up don't like, the people you respect don't like. But that's why I respect them so, because they were willing to follow the Constitution, make sure that everybody was treated fairly. And that was a cost for them. But yet they still did it. Just imagine, people you've known all your life, you do what you think is right, and they say, no more.
Where do you think that resolve comes from?
A commitment and a foundation. I made a point, at Albert Tuttle, those arches out there, some of you all walked through today. In 1961, Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter was able to walk through those arches because Albert Tuttle made the decision to say they could. So I researched it, and I found his background was a foundation of being able to say, this is more important to me than money or popularity.
Or another job on the Supreme Court.
A job on the Supreme Court. I think he was one of the ones on the track that could have become Supreme Court justice as well as John Minor Wisdom. But it's the background. You start building early, and you build from there. And that's what each one of those two in particular. Griffin Bell was outstanding. He was part of that group. But when you look at their backgrounds, you see they didn't become that way overnight. And the title of the book is Unlikely Heroes, because they all came from backgrounds you would think, well, would they do this? Would they be willing to sacrifice this? And they did.
Another unlikely hero maybe a judge would look up to is Hank Aaron. Tell me about Hank Aaron and you.
I admire Hank Aaron, and he's deceased now. There's three things that you and I talked about with Hank Aaron. Some people do a lot of talking. Not anybody in this room, of course. But Hank Aaron let his actions speak for him. Another thing I loved about Hank Aaron, he was consistent. Now, for you non-sports people, bear with me for a second, okay? He played baseball for 23 years. 19 of those 23 years, he had 25 or more home runs. 11 of those 23 years, he drove in over 100 RBIs. He was consistently good. He wasn't good for 1 year, and then 5 years later he was good. He was consistently good for 23 years. And another thing that stands out about Hank Aaron, he was good in the areas you have to be. As a true leader or an individual really committed to their craft learns all aspects of it. He was a 307 lifetime batting average, 755 home runs, 3,700 hits. Most people think of Hank Aaron just as a home run hitter. He was good in a lot of different areas. But what that tells me, now sports people can start listening again, is that you have to be committed enough and dedicated enough to become good in not just one area, but all different areas.
So you talked about consistency and the values.
And he was a good guy.
And he was a great guy. Yeah. And he played for the Braves. A decision came your way that you had a date to decide on, whether to switch careers from being a litigator to a judge. Tell us about that, because all of us in this room are going to have to make a decision after you graduate college. What am I going to do? I kind of call it once the script of college ends. It's very easy. You join ILA your junior year, you do this your senior year, you have an internship. Eventually that script ends. So tell us about, you switched from business to law, then, made this switch. Tell us about those.
Well, I was in business school here, management. Of course, I always tell everybody I can still get into business school now. And I was going to take a job, but I wanted to stay in the Southeast. So I didn't take some of the jobs offered to me in the Northeast. And so I said, okay, I'll take a year off, go back, get a master's degree, and then go from there. I start working in the DA's office here with the idea I'll be here a short period of time, then I'll move back and become a CEO of some large company. That doesn't happen. I go back, I come into law school. So that's one change. But that was a change earlier than that. I had been battalion commander of my high school ROTC, and I was going to go into the military. That changed. So 2 changes already, from the military, from a business life to law school. I go to law school with the idea I wanted to be a litigator. There was a judge here by the name of Judge Barrow, and I was talking to him one day. He said, well, if you want to be a litigator, if you go to a large firm, they're probably not going to let you try cases for a long time, but if you go to a public defender's office or a prosecutor's office, you're going to get a chance to try cases earlier. He was right. So for 5 years, I maybe tried 75 jury trial cases.
And how rare is that for people who don't? People don't go to trial these days.
No, they're not. If you can get someone to try, there are people who've been lawyers for 6, 7, 8 years and never tried a case at all.
You tried 75 in your first 5.
Yeah. Well, see, I was one of those people. They had the idea in the office. They said the oldest assistant district attorney said, just give it to Steve, he'll try it. And they went home. But I loved it. It was something about trying to convince 12 people that don't know each other to believe what you're telling them, and get them to, first of all, to believe what you're telling them, and get the 12 of them to agree. It was such a challenge. It was motivating. And probably the best part would be, in the old days, when the verdict came back, the judge would say, whoever the prosecutor was, received the verdict. And you go and you take the paper from the foreperson, the president can write this, he was the prosecutor, and you open that paper up and it says the verdict you're looking for. Oh, God. But you have to want to do it. Now, let's face facts, it costs a little bit more now to try cases, I admit. But the plan was to be a litigator for 5 years in the district attorney's office, and then leave and go out into the world and try cases all over America and become this great lawyer. And then one day the mayor, Gwen O'Looney of Athens, Clarke County, approached me and says, I'd like for you to be the municipal court judge in Athens, Clarke County. Well, that was...
And how long did you have to make the decision?
She wanted to know the next day.
So
So I was married at the time, I go home and talk to my wife, and I said, this plan I had about becoming a litigator, moving to another city and making all this money and other things, I said, might not work if I take this job. And when she told me, she said, you got to do what's going to make you happy. Still talk to some other friends, and the deciding point was, let's try it. Let's try it.
So besides Lillian, your wife, who else did you call? Like, how do you make you have a day to make a career-defining decision?
Talked to the district attorney, who's my boss. Talked to some other lawyers in Athens that I knew at that time, and they all said the same thing. So, well, if you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. You can always go back and practice law. Now, I'm not saying that's the best way to make decisions, but sometimes we kind of box ourselves in thinking this is our only alternative of doing something, and not kind of consider there are other options beyond that. But I got to admit, I wanted to do it.
Did anyone tell you not to do it?
No. And maybe because they kind of sensed I wanted to do it. But as much as I wanted to litigate, what I would say to students, in making a change in careers, it's always more than just this is the end of the world. Because I told myself, this is not the end of the world. At the time, I was 32. At my age now, 32 looks really good. And so I realized this, but I got a little ego in me that says, you can do this. But it's fearful, because anytime you change brings fear in all of us, whether we want to admit it or not.
What were you afraid of?
Failure. I was okay as a litigator. I was good.
You were good.
And but I'd watch judges and observe things. But here's a clincher. I saw where I could reach more people as judge than I could as a litigator.
And going back to what Lillian told you, you think that would make you happier?
I thought so. I observed judges Obviously, it's old saying, great lawyers know the law, but better lawyers know the judges. So you study, what are they like, what are they going to do? And so I had a general idea, and I felt I could do a good job. But again, there was that element of fear because I was changing the plan.
A year into, so you tell the mayor of Athens you want to do it. A year into it, how did you know you made the right decision?
Well, I set goals. Two things to do. I set goals. I said I want to be able to handle these many cases in 12 months. I want to be able to make sure that the cases I've handled are being affirmed. But at the end of 1 year,
when you say affirmed, what do you mean by affirmed?
Well, for those, believe it or not, sometimes as judges, everybody don't agree with our decisions, and they call through something called appeal it. And the appeal, in my case, the appeal will go to the Superior Court judges. Since the municipal court, so we go to Superior Court judges. And you want them to say, look at what you did, and say, yeah, we agree, he was right, or she was right. So I want to make sure I said, you're handling, municipal court is a traffic court, more or less, misdemeanor marijuana. So you're handling probably 35,000 cases a year.
How many cases were you handling as a litigator?
As a litigator, I probably tried about 20 cases a year in jury trials and probably disposed of about 300.
It's a big increase.
Big increase. But, the difficulty is a little bit different. But, yeah. So you just sat down and said, look, the city of Athens, without Athens, Clarke County handled this many cases. The Athens, Clarke County Medical School handled this many cases. So combined, it was this total. So my goal was to at least meet that total. But I didn't really have control over it. Cases come, but once they're docketed, let's make sure at the end of the day, I want to be able to say, I have this many cases left on the docket. You're never going to have zero. But how well you move those cases along. That was one thing. But the more important part was, again, an evaluation, a critique of myself. One thing you can't do, or I try to do, is lie to myself. You have to be secure enough in yourself to be honest with yourself of whether or not you're doing a good job, bad job, or how you can improve. So at the end of 1 year, I evaluated. Did I do a good job well enough? Did the job come in a way that I make it better for someone else? And then you also keep in mind, you might say, you might have disposed of 30,000 cases, or as district court judge, 500 civil cases. And you may meet your goal, but then when you critique it, you may say, well, you know what? The process I put in, I should have gotten rid of 600 cases.
Yeah. How is important, there's kind of this myth of leadership, the leader is on the island and the leader can do no wrong. Of how important is the leader to have feedback and accountability from people who can deliver that to the boss?
As you know, when I hire law clerks, I try to hire law clerks that are not yes people. Yes law clerks will get you reversed. I want law clerks that say, well, here's what I think. I try to hire law clerks that don't think the same way I think. I want a different perspective. When we sit down for the staff meetings and we're talking about a case, I want law clerks that I may say, and I'll give you an example. I had one law clerk, Georgia graduate, and I decided she had brought me a memo, and I looked at it and I said, I don't want to rule this way. I think I'm going to rule the other way. And she said, Judge, hear me out. She argued facts. She argued the law. She gave reason. And at the end of her 20-minute presentation, and looking at her brief again, I said, okay, fine, I'm going to go with you. The case gets appealed. It goes to I was a Superior Court judge at the time. It goes up to the Georgia Court of Appeals. They affirm me. Mm-hmm. I go my way, I get reversed.
Yeah. So you're Superior Court judge in Athens. You start to build a brand of someone who wants to get it right, do what's right for people, make an impact on people. How did you build a brand that Gary Blassingame thought you should be United States District Court judge?
Well, again, it comes back to just working hard. First of all, a judge should treat everybody that comes to court with respect. And I think the lawyers, and what lawyers look for, it comes back again to Hank here, consistency. And they expect you to be as just prepared as they are. One of the things I found out, and the lawyers will tell you this, they hate to come to court and there's a judge that's not prepared, haven't read the brief, not prepared for their case. They want you to know their case and prepare. And I tried to do it in every case. But also I let the law dictate how the ruling would go. And Gary did well.
Tell us about, Gary was the impetus that started all this. How do you become a United States District Court judge?
Well, I was at an event, and a judge by the name of Hugh Lawson in the Middle District of Georgia was retiring. And we were in, President Obama just got elected. And we were talking, he says, Judge, you should apply for that. And I said, well, I don't think I would get it if I applied for it. And he says these famous words, if you don't apply, you're definitely not going to get it. And then I talked to my friend Dan Coonan about it. Well, biggest cheerleader I got walking on earth is Dan Coonan. Yes, apply. But here's how it gets kind of sort of crazy a little bit. Athens in the Middle District of Georgia. Hugh Lawson's in Macon. I apply for his position. They must ask me to send in everything I've ever done. Court orders, opinions, rulings. One day, I get a call, and I never forget, it's on February 28th, 2010 at 6:51 and 32 seconds. It's a person from the Justice Department. And he says, is this Judge Jones? I said, yeah. He says, well, we've gotten your name from the White House, and we're considering you for the Northern District of Georgia. And I said, well, I applied for the middle. He said, we're quite aware of what you did, Judge Jones, when you applied. We're considering you for the Northern District of Georgia. And here's the question that really I laugh about is, do you want to be considered? Yes.
Yeah. But that would require a move from Athens.
It required a move from Athens to Atlanta.
So you say yes.
Yes.
But you got to get appointed, but you got to get confirmed by the Senate. Tell us about that process.
The process starts, it's one of the most detailed, thorough processes I've gone through. I had 10 FBI agents checking all aspects of my background. I was in my 50s at the time. And they go back and they talk to my high school sophomore biology teacher. They talk to neighbors. I had one neighbor call me and says, the FBI wants to talk to me about you. What have you done? I've done anything. They probably had really, I won't say, they probably had about 5,000 pages of paperwork on me. Every speech I ever given. My opinions, I go to the clerk of court for the Superior Court of Athens, Clark County, Beverly, Logan. I said, they want every ruling I've ever made, every case I've ever tried. Well, I've been a Superior Court judge for 16 years. And she looks at me, she says, you're kidding me, right? The process going through the Senate hearing, the part I remember, we go the day ahead of time to the Justice Department. And one thing I remember them telling us is, look, just answer the question they ask you. You're not there to impress them. If you start doing more, you're going to get in trouble. There was 4 of us, 2 individuals from Oregon, 1 individual from North Carolina, myself. You go into the Senate hearing, you're nervous, and some of the Saxby Chambliss, I will always respect him for this, gave a great introduction. But he did something else that really sort of, for me, calmed the room, brought the tension down. We had beat Auburn 2 straight years in football. Okay? The president remembers that. But the year before, the Saturday before, they had Cam Newton, and they beat us. Senator Jeff Sessions is on the Senate Judiciary.
From Alabama.
From Alabama. And Senator Chambliss, he ends up, he says these great things about me, and I'm just, oh God, I'm good. I want to turn to the lady and say, see, I told you I was good. But then he says, now Senator Sessions, I realize that Auburn beat Georgia last Saturday. And Judge Jones and I are both dedicated dogs. So I don't want you asking him any questions about that game. He's always, well, Senator Chambliss, he's going to talk about that game. I was relaxed after that.
How important is it to have friends like Saxby Chambliss?
It makes a world of son of Saxby Chambliss and son of John Isaacson both called me on the day I was nominated The way they did in those days, the president of the White House didn't call you as nominated. The senior senators would call you up. So the chairman called me up first and says, "You're going to be nominated for this position." He talked to me, and then Senator Axon called about 20 minutes later, and they both said two things to me. We will get you confirmed.
Because something happened where the nomination lapsed.
Yeah, in other words, it's in an election year, the president nominated me in an election year of 2010. But when I talked to some of the chairmen, he told me, so look, this is an election year, and we're going to take the money of August off to go campaign, and we're going to take the money of October off and go campaign. So we might not be able to get you confirmed by the end of December 31st of this year. Well, if you're not confirmed that year, the president has to renominate you. Well, they didn't get it through by December 31st. But then he says, but don't worry about it. You're going to have the same president, Johnny and I still committed, but you still worry a little bit. What's the president changes his mind, whatever? You go through the process, and the process, believe it or not, what I went through was much smoother. And I think it's probably easier than probably the process now. But what I liked about it is that every senator that could vote voted for me. There was 90 senators that day, and all 90 voted for me. And Senator Grassley came on the floor. You got to keep one thing in mind. I'm nominated by a Democrat president. Senator Grassley, the minority person for the Senate Judiciary, came on the floor of the Senate that day, and I have it in my office, and spoke on my behalf, along with Senator Chambliss and Senator Axon. And, working together is not bad. I highly recommend it. I don't tell anybody I was the best person they could nominate, because I don't lie to myself, but I was one of them there. And here was these Republican senators and this Democrat president working together. And knowing Senator Chambliss, Senator Axon, hey, listen, I'm tell you all something. It doesn't hurt to be a UGA graduate, okay? It helped a lot.
Well, and particularly, this goes back to being the brand of it's being involved as a UGA alumnus. And tell us about your involvement post-grad.
Well, I kind of worked indirect with both the senators doing things here at the University of Georgia. I've been given a lot of opportunity here at Georgia. I thank President Adamson, I thank President Moorhead. They've given me a lot of opportunities to work, from being on the foundation board, the athletic board. I was sworn in to be a United States District Court judge 2011. I was scheduled to start being the National Alumni Association president in July of 2011. And I remember I got a call from President Adams. He said, well, it may be a little difficult. If you want to kind of just not be the Alumni Association president now and wait, we'll understand. It was an opportunity to be the Alumni Association president for this great university I wasn't going to pass up. So I talked later, and I said, well, it's going to be a little hard for 2 years because I was just starting off as district court judge. I remember talking to people who said, it's difficult, it's different being a superior court judge. And they were right. Mm-hmm. But it was an experience in life that I never would give up. Because again, it gave me an opportunity to meet people, get to know people, see things from different, the best thing I think about life and the opportunity I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of different people and learn and think outside the box. I've been put in situations to take me out of my comfort zone, look at things from other people's point of view. In the 6th grade, I went from an all segregated school to a desegregated school. And I resented it at first, but probably one of the best things that happened to me, because it enabled me to have a relationship with people that I may never have a relationship with. I think I was telling somebody this morning, there's a friend I made in 6th grade at Barnett Shoals Elementary School named Lee Davis. This happened to be his dad is Earl Davis, which was an accounting professor here. 50-something years later, Lee and I are still close friends. Relationships, getting to know people, looking at different views. I think he learned something from me. I learned something from him.
Looking, you get confirmed 90 to 100% vote, 90 senators on the floor that day.
I still want to figure out where those other 10
were. Where the other 10 were, we should. How do you build a team of law clerks and build out chambers? Tell us about how you run chambers. What's your strategy of attracting talent, keeping talent?
Well, one of the things, being a UGA law school graduate, I have a lot of people sitting in this audience that help me find law clerks, get calls, people know my personality. So I have some help, but what I'm looking for and what friends that help me, I'm looking for someone that fits into chambers. I'm not necessarily looking for that one that's the highest rate in the law class. I've been known to take the number 9 person and not take the number 2 person. Because I look, when you talk to the number 2, nothing against number 2, but number 2, I said, doesn't fit my chambers.
The culture.
The culture. We work as a team. If you feel you're too good to do certain things, so I watch how when the potential law clerks come in and they're waiting to be interviewed by me, do they speak to the administrative assistant? Do they act courteous to the administrative assistant? I ask the administrative assistant, what did they say, how they act? When you're talking to them, you want somebody that wants to work as a team. When I select interns, and I was interviewing interns yesterday, I told them there's 2 people that want to intern in the United States District Court Judge's office. One that just want to put it on the resume to say, hey, and the other that wants to learn. The one that wants to learn is going to have a better experience, and I think turn out to be the better lawyer. So I'm looking for that person that fits in the chambers. And the other thing I'm looking for is the individual who's not afraid to step up and says, here's what I think, Judge. Here's what I think. Here's the reason why. Not emotion. Emotion doesn't drive in the law. Fact. That's what I'm looking for.
And one of those moments that y'all had to do was that death penalty case in the 90s.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
I had been a United States District Court judge for a grand total of 9 months. The system set up, once the individual's been sentenced to death, they go through the whole state system. They what we call exhaust all their state remedies. They then file every time a lawsuit in the United States District Court asking for the district court judge to enter an injunction to stop the carrying out of the penalty. I had 3 law clerks. I could sense all 3 was like realizing, hey, our decision may result in someone getting the death penalty.
There's emotion to it.
It's emotion to it. You have to make the decision within a reasonable time limit because you have a date set. I realized my decision is going to be appealed to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Their decision is going to be appealed to the Supreme Court. So we get the case, we have a hearing, we come back to the office. I bring them in. I said, look, we're not here to decide whether the death penalty is right or wrong. That's not what they're asking us to do. They're asking me to review decisions made by previous courts, decisions made by his lawyer, and find out and determine whether those decisions were correctly made within the Constitution of the United States. We're not deciding anything more than that. And I had to get that back to them because you don't make any more important decision on whether or not somebody's going to live or die. And I also had to make sure I understood that as well. And so we started at 6 o'clock that night working on the case, and we leave the office about 2:30 that morning. And then we come back at 9 o'clock that next morning, and we go everything we've done. And I went to each one of them. How you feel about how we're going to rule? How you feel about how we're going to rule? How you feel about how we're going to rule? Now, when I actually told Lillian that, she said, what if one of them had said, I don't like it? What have you done? I said, I really don't know, Lillian. All 3 says, I think we have done and the ruling we're going to issue is right.
And how important, the next step you have to do is you have to deliver that news.
Yes.
And we've talked about, our whole system of government is based on the principle that legitimacy is for the losers. Can you lose an election and say, I lost, good game? Can I lose a court case and say, you know what, I understand it, Judge? How do you deliver life-altering news to someone for them to accept it?
Well, first of all, you have to start off with, you're not trying to get them to accept it. You're trying to explain to them why you came to the decision you came to. So I try to do, you don't, when you deliver the news, you don't personally call the lawyer in or have a hearing. It's still an order. So what I try to do even today, but especially in that particular order, explain why I came to that decision. If you try, it's hard to ask somebody to accept some facts that's going to change their life tremendously. What you want to do is explain why. In other words, you have Gore versus Bush. And it starts at the district court, it moves to the 11th Circuit, and it moves to the Supreme Court. Decisions made. The strength of our country, and I believe with all my whole heart, the foundation for America is the rule of law. The respect and acceptance of the rule of law. There are people that strongly disagreed with that decision. But notice, there were no tanks in the streets. There was nobody talking about maybe somebody on a small scale, but on a large scale by overthrowing the government. It's respect for the law. I'm 5'11" and 155 pounds after 4 good meals, okay? I don't scare anybody with my body, all right? But upon my signature, multi-billion-dollar companies have to stop doing what they're doing. Mm-hmm. States voting changes. It's not because of the fear of me, it's the respect for the rule of law.
So in that case, you were delivering news to an individual person. Most recently, Chief Justice John Roberts had to write an opinion for the whole country about tariffs. You've written a few of those cases for the state of Georgia. How do you communicate something when the audience is an entire state or entire country?
You start off by making sure you follow all the contents the law requires. You touch all those bases, and then you go back again, you explain why. And you have to keep in mind who your audience is. Your audience is individuals that agree with you. Your audience is individuals that disagree with you. But your audience are statewide. Someone in Metro Atlanta may view it different. Someone in Brunswick, Georgia. And so you try to write an order that explains it just as well. And also you have to keep in mind, you're writing the order not so much for the lawyers as much for John Doe and Susie Doe in the street area.
The clients. The lay people.
The lay people. But it's never easy delivering bad news. Well, it's not bad. It's never easy delivering news that people don't necessarily want to hear.
How much is that? How do you learn that? Because it's emotion. Like there, as much as we want to say there's not emotion in the law, there's not emotion in business. Emotion is central to how we communicate and deliver news to people. How did you get better at that?
Theodore Roosevelt once said, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I try to relate to people that this decision, especially when I'm giving somebody news they don't hear, I really gave it all I had. I really considered your point of view. I cared about your point of view. Sometimes law clerks, you guys would get mad at me and say, Judge, you let that hearing go on and on and on, and they kept talking. That's that day in court. I want people to know I cared enough in making this decision. So when you deliver that, you're hoping the person will trust you enough and believe you enough that, yeah, they're ruling against me, but he cared. Let me say this right quick. One of the best compliments I ever got as a judge, I try a case, a bench trial, and finish the trial up, I rule against one side. I always ask the lawyers, anything else, the lawyers, Judge, we respectfully disagree with your ruling, but we feel we got a fair day in court. That's what you want.
How important is that?
That's very important. To me, that's probably one of the best things anybody ever said to me. He said, we respectfully disagree with your ruling, but we feel we got a fair day in court. My client, I do.
Well, good. Well, I think we can probably open up to questions now. I think we'll start with...
Hello. Judge Jones, thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Cox, for both of your times. My name is Alessandro Flores-Recco. I am a ILA fellow, and I'm currently studying finance and international business. Question for you, Judge Jones. You shared your story about the Senate not initially voting on your confirmation. I was wondering for students in this room who might also similarly face a variety of obstacles and rejection earlier in their careers, how you recommend maintaining perspective and continuing moving forward.
Good question. What I try to do, and I recommend you all students, is also look at the big picture on it. It may be something that does not work out, a rejection, and it's old saying sometimes one door closes and 2 or 3 more opens, and sometimes I've had rejections, and later I find out that worked out to my advantage. But you can't let rejection stop you. It's just, you probably already know this. If you don't, you're going to find out. In life, there's going to be disappointments. Everything you try to do is not going to be successful. I'm personal, I can tell you, right, I'm personal. I can tell a lot of times try to do things didn't work out. But that's where the perseverance come in and self-security.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Molly K. Paris. I'm an ILA Leadership Fellow studying English and language and literature. And my question, Judge Jones, throughout your career, from your early experiences in Athens to serving on the federal bench, you've emphasized the importance of values and strong foundations. For students starting their careers and as we want to lead with integrity, what is one practice or habit that we should start practicing now?
Can you repeat that last part again?
Yeah, absolutely. For students who want to lead with integrity in our future careers, what is one practice or habit that we should start building now?
Now, get to a point where certain things you're not willing to compromise on. Integrity is one of them. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said one time, there should be at least one thing in your life that you're willing to die for. Well, as students, when I swear in new lawyers, and this is something you all want to remember, to get to be a lawyer, you got undergraduate school, law school, you got a bar exam. I tell them, you worked very hard to get to where you're at today. There's not one case, no amount of money, worth you giving up a risk of losing all that you did to get to this point. And that's going to be temptations out there in life. But I emphasize to them is not one case, no amount of money worth risking everything you've done to get to this point. But again, you have to also be prepared for the cost. And again, it may not be fair, but there may be a cost. It's okay, fine, I take it. Now, it's easy for me to say, I'm an old man now, you know.
Any other questions?
Just like having a grand jury, you know.
Got one in the back.
I'll speak loud. I really appreciate your presentation. You emphasize the importance of the rule of law. And when you're a judge following patterns and precedent on that death penalty case, but certainly some of the examples you gave from the civil rights movement, that contrast in the Bible between Romans 13 and Luke 18, where the persistent widow is challenging the law. There is a time, I think, according to the legal ethics books, challenge pattern and precedent when there's reasonable grounds for disagreeing with it. What are your thoughts on making that distinction?
There's a case decided in 1896 called Plessy versus Ferguson. It was precedence. And in 1952, the Supreme Court looked at it, and they looked at it, and people challenged it. It would never have gotten to the Supreme Court if they hadn't challenged it. People had said, Plessy versus Ferguson is the law of the land, it's precedence, that's it, we're not going to look at anything else. So they challenged it. And the result was Brown versus Board of Education. And because of Brown versus Board of Education, I have a chance to sit here today. So there's nothing wrong with challenging the law, challenging aspects of the law. That's good. You know, the lawyers are here to tell you, Dean Rodriguez tell you, that's all we do all day long. We challenge the law. The thing is, though, is that we always got to keep in mind, at the end of the day, sometimes when we challenge it and the ruling goes the other way, we have to respect the rule of law. Don't mean you won't come back again. And people forget that Plessy versus Ferguson wasn't challenged for the first time in 1952. It was challenged a lot of other times. But you got to be persistent. But you also got to do it, as I like to say, in a respectful way for the rule of law. Good morning.
Question for you about leadership legacy. How important is it to balance what you're working on for long-term gain versus what's immediately in front of you and then creating opportunities for legacy?
Ooh, that's a toughie. I don't think so much in terms of personal legacy as I do group legacy. Let me explain what that means. One of my law clerks, and I'll use another example. Well, I'll use my example. I don't worry so much about how many awards I get, how many cases I get affirmed on. I love every degree I got from the University of Georgia, but I don't worry so much about that. At the end of the day, I'm more concerned about, have I made the law better being a part of it? I have roughly 32 law clerks. If they're out doing a good job, 2 of them are judges now. One's a multimillionaire right here. If they're doing good, that's my legacy. And the last thing I look at, and this is probably the most important part, is that have I brought more respect to the rule of law being a part of it? If the answer to all those things are yes, then I think my legacy is set there and set later. Hey, one of my law clerks told me the other day, said, Judge, you're on the other side of Wednesday now in age. And she was right. But long after Steve Jones is gone, they're going to be there. And they're doing the things that I think is right and uncompromising, then that long-term legacy keeps going. Nobody's going to remember how many awards Steve Jones got. They don't hardly remember the cases I get affirmed on. They try to remember the ones I get reversed on, but they're gonna remember what good. If anybody in here respects the law better because of something I did or said or opinion, then that's good.
Mr. Coonan, please stand up.
Hey, he can't ask questions.
You've talked a lot about your work in the law and your work as a judge. But you've also done so much outside the law in terms of rendering public service, including for the University of Georgia. For young people in the room, I'd like you to reflect a little bit on sort of that work outside of work and the importance of it in your life and in connecting with people.
Well, my wife will tell you I love being with people. Before I answer your question, I'll give you a quick story. We had dinner one night, and I paid a check, and I'm getting ready to go, and my wife said, Steve, I have a question for you. You see that door back there that you came in an hour ago? Is it possible for you to get up from this chair and walk out that door without talking to everybody in between there? Well, my ego kicked in. I said, I can do anything I set my mind to. And then I looked and I saw this sea of people that I knew. And I turned to her and I said, no, I can't do it. To answer your question, Dan, I'm sitting here today because people helped me. People sacrificed for me. Those civil rights leaders I talked about at the beginning, so I feel I have an obligation to give back. This university has made Steve Jones. I remember in my investiture, go to investiture, President Moorhead's there. Letters written for me. Everything I've done, I've gotten no judgeship that I've attained, and I have somebody in the university leadership helping me. So for me to be on the Alumni Association board or any board here at the university, that's an obligation. It's me giving back for who helped me. Don't forget the bridge that brought you over. So when I get involved in things in the community, I grew up in Athens. I'm a native here in Athens. So when I get involved in organizations in Athens, it's my way of paying my debt back. I'm indebted to Athens, Clark County. I'm indebted to the state of Georgia. So for me to pay back is helping me pay for the rent I've gotten for being here. And so, again, if I'm helping somebody have a better life, if some of your students are better because of anything I've done, that's good, because I'm here because you all helped me.
Thank you very much for those inspiring words and for visiting us today. On behalf of the Institute for Leadership Advancement and the Shoukry Leadership Speaker Series, we would like you to present with a small token of our appreciation as a thank you for being with us today. Please join me in thanking Honorable Steve C. Jones.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Really good.
Also, we want to thank you all for attending the Spring 2026 Shoukry Leadership Speaker Series. Again, thank you for being with us today.